My beginning was so humble and there was scarcity. However, my mother taught me, do not let that limit you, and that you are going to make changes in the world and that you have a gift. For years, I sat on the perimeter when I came into a room. I was invisible. I didn't take my seat at the table, and I didn't have the courage to speak up. I wish I would have known sooner that your difference is not deficiency. It is the value. I had to stop playing it safe because I was there to make an impact, and just get out there and not wait for the right moment, because it's never going to be a right moment.
What does your seat at the table look like today, and what does that mean to you? Hi, Charlotte. Welcome to Michelle's Seat at the Table.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining me. I am so honored to have you at the table here with me today. And I know that the listeners, the viewers are going to get a treat. So as you know, this podcast is about leadership, community, and the conversations that shape us. Life is not just about the destination. The richness comes from our stories and our journey, and I look forward to hearing about your journey today. I'm going to give the listeners just a little bit. Your bio and background is so impressive, and it's long because you've had an amazing career. I'm not going to go through it all, but I'm going to give them a little taste, and then I'll turn it over to you to tell us a little bit more about who you are and your path. Dr. Charlotte Jones-Burton is a seasoned pharmaceutical executive dedicated to creating healthier communities globally through drug development, patient advocacy, and people engagement. A catalyst for systemic change, she is the founder and president of OneWeReach, a global organization empowering diverse leaders to transform life sciences. So Charlotte, you've had a career that has expanded clinical medicine, drug development, leadership, executive leadership, and now venture investing. When you look back on your career, was there a defining moment that set you on your current path or a turning point?
It's interesting to hear you read my bio, and thank you so much for sharing it with the audience. When I think about, your question about a defining moment, it starts at the beginning for me. And for me, my beginning was so humble and there was scarcity. However, my mother taught me, do not let that limit you, and that you are going to make changes in the world and that you have a gift. And so it was these positive messages during my formative years, and even before that and after that, from one person who instilled in me that there is a lot that needs to happen and that I could impact the change. So my defining moment happened very early on. Now, what came after it, I would say, is how do you put all the pieces together? And it's been intentional because I had a foundation. So it's been intentional in terms of the kind of the path that you're going to go on. You're going to be a doctor. My mother was very clear about that. You're going to be a doctor.
Whether you want to or not.
Whether you want to or not. And I'm a bit of or have been a people pleaser when it related to my mom. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor and I have a gift for this. And then it was really about every place that I've been in. What do I want to do to make a change here? Where can I help move the needle? And so I'm going to now fast forward from that beginning to I came into the pharmaceutical industry, not knowing that it was corporate America. I came because I wanted to make a change. I wanted to help patients.
Yes.
And so here I stumble into the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm like, wait a minute. We're not focused on patients. And so every conversation was really about me trying to connect the dots. The patient, where is the patient's voice? Do we have all patients' voices? Do patients show up in what I'm doing? who's here that looks like me? And if they're not here, why are they not here? And what difference can I do? And so the turning point in pharma came when I finally figured it all out in terms of, okay, this is really what this industry does. This is what they don't do, but this is what this industry does. They're helping people get medicines to overcome very serious and chronic diseases, life-threatening, many of them. Okay, I get that. And then what can I do to make a difference? And once I got the lay of the land, once I understood all of that, I would say that was my turning point, because then I could figure out what could I do to make a change.
And it takes a while to get the lay of the land, particularly when you're not used to a, quote unquote corporate environment. And so when you figured that out, you were like, now I know, here's what my next step is.
Exactly. And so I always tell people I'm someone who can operate in the gray really well. And I know that it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. And so once I figured out the lay of the land, I figured out who wasn't at the table. I think it's so poignant that you have this metaphor in terms of the table. So it's figuring out who's not at the table, whose voice is not in the room, and how then can I invite it? Yes. And really not being interested in today's world, even though that was 20 years ago, because I've been in the industry for 20 years, not interested in being a Harriet Tubman. I always tell people that. I'm not interested in being Harriet Tubman, but knowing that I am a pioneer. Yes, and figuring out how can I bring people together to really help move the needle. And so I think that turning point for me, to get back to your question, came about 4 years into the industry, my career into the industry.
So the point about the podcast, Michelle's Seat at the Table, and I started this podcast for a similar reason and passion. So it's a bit twofold. The table is the boardroom and my career and the ambitions that I've had to get to senior levels in corporate America. But it also is the table in that I love food, I love eating, I love wine, and a lot of the conversations happen at different tables. But your point around who's at the table, and I also often say and refer to people who've pulled out the chair for me, but my responsibility to pull out the chair for others. And so this is really my passion, and how do I give people guidance and advice and tell stories about that journey that many don't know. Like you said, it took some time to get the lay of the land, and sometimes you need someone to tell you a bit of those corporate secrets and what are the things that you don't know, and the rooms that you maybe aspire to be in, but what are the conversations and how do you get there? So my question for you is, in your career, you've sat at a lot of tables. In your professional world, from clinical, executive in your corporate positions, but also in the work that you're doing right now in not-for-profit as well. So when you think about those tables, is there any advice that you wish someone would have given you earlier, not just to make it to the tables, but navigating once you get there?
I heard Carla Harris say, if you are invited into a room, know that you have to get a seat at the table, and you have to have a voice, and you have to speak. So you're in the room and you need to do something about being in the room. And so what I wish I had known, because, for years I sat on the perimeter when I came into a room. So I was invisible. I didn't take my seat at the table. I might have been thinking something and I didn't have the courage to speak up. Many times I brought a different perspective. And I wish I would have known that
Yeah.
earlier, that that different perspective that you bring is valuable. Because when you don't have different perspectives, you get this phenomenon of groupthink, you don't challenge. And I always say that conflict breeds excellence. And so I felt different, and I wore that as in the corporate environment, which was really interesting. The more I worked with a coach, an executive coach, the more I realized I'm showing up differently in this corporate environment than I show up at home in my community. And why is that? And so I did that work to understand, but I wish I would have known sooner that your difference is not
That's the
deficient.
value.
It's not a deficiency. It is the value. And to go ahead and have that courage, push past that fear and put your voice into the room in the conversation, on the table, if you will. So that's what I wish I would have known coming into it.
That's beautiful. And I felt like that for so long. And I did a podcast episode. One of my first episodes was about the masks we wear, because I too felt I wanted to be invisible because I was different and I didn't have a blueprint, and I didn't have early in my career a mentor to show me the way. And so I was just trying to figure it out. But I also started developing these different personas of who I was, kind of what you're mentioning. But I realized after many years, a couple of decades, quite honestly, that being more authentic and removing those masks helped me to build and foster relationships, build teams, build trust. How do you balance that authenticity and how you show up, whether it's be it corporate, not-for-profit, the organizations that you're in, the rooms that you're in?
Well, a lot of what you're talking about, it's exhausting
It is
to
so
be a
exhausting.
different person than who you really are. And so I realized that once I could stop that, stop it, just be who you are, say what it is you want to say. And a part of it was really having the language. So being able to say, I have a different perspective. Let me share with you. And so it really was this different language. And it was that I'm very observant. So I observed, and you get many different flavors. So you're able to observe the bad actors with the good actors, and you're able to then say, okay, it's my turn. And so I'm going to try to say what I want to say, what I'm thinking, but let me preface it so that I give some context, right? I give some context so that, again, I'm inviting myself to go ahead and speak up, but then I'm going to give myself a little bit of a buffer in the event that someone doesn't agree, and I'm not a confrontational person either. I'm an only child. So, I didn't always have the, look at the siblings and be able to fight against them. So I'm not confrontational. So I didn't ever want to put myself into a place of where, I would be debating, really publicly with someone,
Right.
or many people. So that was also, I was reserved. But what I will say is I got to a point of where I had to stop playing it safe because I was there to make an impact. And so I had to say to myself, are you here to make an impact, or are you sitting on the perimeter? And if you're here to make an impact, there's urgency. Patients are waiting. And what it is that you need to do, you need to go ahead and put your panties on, your big girl panties on, and just get out there and not wait for the right moment, because it's never going to be a right moment. And once I did that, it happens to be, I'm a I'm a great person. So it wasn't like who I really was something I didn't want to share. I just had to
Yeah.
learn. And there is oftentimes in being vulnerable, you have to be courageous to be vulnerable. And
Yes.
so I just had to understand that that's a part of it. And the more you sharpen the muscle, the sharper it gets. And so that really is, those are the things that I had to do, all while working with, I will tell everybody, I worked with a team of coaches throughout my journey to really help me figure out how to do the things that I was saying I wanted to do in this environment that I was in.
There are so many, thank you for sharing that. There's so many good things that came out of what you just said. And be it the coaches, the support, finding your voice. You and I actually have met. We were in circles, but I'm a member of OneWeReach, the organization that you founded. And I see on your screen, we're celebrating the 10th anniversary. But it's also about finding your tribe and your people. And one of the things that I really have grown to appreciate even more about OneWeReach is the support, pulling out the chair at the table, and it's helping people find their voice and build their skills. But for those that are not aware of this fantastic organization, can you tell us about OneWeReach, how it came to be, and what the work is that you do and your vision for it?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk about it. And it really goes back to trying to figure out what is it that I'm going to do to have the impact. And once I figured out, the role that I had within the industry, which I came in on the development side. So the development part of the research and development that's done within the pharmaceutical industry. And I realized a lot of what we have to do in order to support the business is we run the clinical trials. And the clinical trials should reflect who has the disease so that we get the data that's needed from a safety, but also does it work from an efficacy standpoint, so that if the drug gets approved, and that helps support the approval from agencies around the world, but like the Food and Drug Agency, the FDA, it helps it get approved. But then after approval, it helps our colleagues in the commercial space be able to sell and market the medicine. And that's how it gets to patients. So once I figured out that that's the business, then I said, okay, so if in my area we don't have what it takes to get people into the trials, we don't have the experts who are helping us do that, and they're helping us with our strategy, then the rest of the things really fall short. Mm-hmm. How do I find people who can help me? Because I'm only one person. How can I find people who can help me? And so indeed, what we ended up doing is creating an organization, which, as you've mentioned, is OneWeReach. And we are really a strategic and business insights organization focused on empowering professionals to really come to the table, which is what we're talking about, have a voice, put their perspective on the table so that we can ensure that all people have access to improved health outcomes, which is what our industry is all about. And so that's OneWeReach. Saying it and doing it are two different things, right? You need support, as you've mentioned. You need
Yes.
other like-minded individuals who are focused on that. And you need to learn some skills in order to be able to
Yes.
do it, as well as make sure that you have the mental, the physical, and the spiritual wherewithal to withstand the challenges that we've already talked about, the exhaustion that just really comes with being in an environment where you have to discuss and debate and influence in order to make things happen. And so that's what we have created with OneWeReach. And this is our 10th year, as you've mentioned, and it really is a labor of love, and something that I'm just so passionate about, devoting not just my time, but bringing in bright minds to really help the industry move forward.
It's such an incredible organization, and on behalf of all of us who have benefited and have learned and have, picked up other people in our tribes as a part of the organization, I want to say thank you and keep up the good work. And you certainly can count on me and many others to continue on that path as well. But it's meant a lot. And even just this week, like the programming that happens, I've been the last few weeks a part of different programs, and I continue to learn. And that's one of the things that's important to me is my growth professionally and personally. And OneWeReach has been a significant part of that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the final questions before we get into the lightning round, and you've talked a little bit about this, but all of the things that you've done and you've accomplished in the work that you're doing with OneWeReach, what does your seat at the table look like today? And what does that mean to you?
Well, today I have a lot more freedoms than I've ever had because I tell people I'm retired. What ended up in terms of my career, I mentioned 20 years ago, I came into the industry working at really large corporations. And then I went to progressively smaller. And the last company that I was at was a biotech company. And as you know, the way that biotech works with big pharma is biotech can really move quickly. It can be very innovative and get things done. But biotech doesn't have the resources that big pharma has to then bring things to market and globally be able to get them to patients. And so there is this symbiotic relationship that happens. And once you are able to get something to a certain point, there's usually, for successful biotechs, there is an acquisition. And the last biotech that I was at as the interim chief medical officer, we were acquired for $3.4 billion by a big pharma company. And so that afforded me an opportunity to focus on a different aspect of really what I've been talking about. And what is that aspect? At the time, I was at the biotech and it was acquired. I was also on the board of another publicly traded company. And I began to see with my seat at that board table that it really was about investments into companies, into biotechs. And the investment world is where decisions get made in terms of what things make it through. And so now I began to put together the pieces. As an operator, I was focused on development and then working closely with my commercialization partners. But we were just working on what it had already been decided we would work on. And so sitting at the board table, I got a chance to appreciate the more upstream and where decisions get made from an investment standpoint. And so I decided that I wanted to be involved in that part of it. So today, while I'm still sharing my expertise from a drug development standpoint, I'm a partner at a venture capital firm. We have portfolio companies, so we have small biotechs that are trying to be successful and have these, move innovation forward and then have exits. But I'm able to bring my drug development expertise to really help the companies that we decide that we're going to invest in. And so that is one of the things that I do. You mentioned OneWeReach. I'm also able to focus more on OneWeReach and making sure strategically we're doing what needs to happen so that we can move the needle within the life sciences industry. And then I consult from also from a strategic R&D perspective, which is my area of expertise.
So while you say retired, it's not really retirement.
Well, that's what my husband says. He's like, I don't think you're retired. I don't think that's the right word.
No,
But for
it's
me,
not.
like I had the opportunity to remove a larger piece that really has a lot of structure. Like, your day job is what we usually
Yes.
say, us entrepreneurs.
The
It's like
corporate.
we have the day job. And while I don't rule out that I would, for the right opportunity to work with the right team, might go back to it. It feels really good to be able to say that chapter is where that chapter is, and what I call this now is retirement. So anyway, that's what I am still very busy, but it's different.
Yes, excellent. Well, thank you. And I like to close with a few lightning round questions. Some of the answers may not be so quick, but we'll see. What are you currently binge watching?
I just finished 4 seasons. 4 seasons, and this is season 2 that I just finished.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you an early bird or a night owl?
I'm a night owl. I now have an Aura ring, and it tells me when my bedtime is approaching, though. So
Oh,
I'm getting a little bit better at going to bed a little bit earlier so that I'm very goal oriented. So I always want to get a really good sleep score, but I really am a night owl.
well, since you're retired, you can go to bed later because you don't have to wake up as early on a consistent basis either.
That's definitely true. But then, it's like you miss half of the day if you stay in bed all day. I'm not a slacker. I'm
I
definitely
know
not a
that for
slacker.
sure.
So I do not want to be in bed all day.
I understand. Okay. And when you're working, whatever that work may be for you, do you prefer complete silence or a playlist?
It depends. If I am trying to do some deep work, I now have an agent that helps me with a weekly brief, and it puts time on my calendar, and it has this deep work is what it says. So when I'm working deeply and I need to think, I do like silence. But if it's just checking emails, doing something that doesn't require a lot of concentration, I can have some music in the background.
Okay. I like that. Speaking of music, what was your last concert you went to or your very favorite concert?
Listen, what was the last concert? And we go to concerts quite frequently. The last concert I went to last year was Chris Brown.
Oh,
Yes, that
okay.
was the last one. And my favorite was On the Run with Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Oh, yes. Yes, that was a good one. They make such a great team together.
Yeah.
When you're gonna spend a small fortune, but when you walk out, you're gonna realize it was worth a small fortune.
Yeah, it was wonderful. That was all-time favorite.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you please let people know what's the best way to find out more about the work that you're doing and to connect with you?
Yes, so people can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just send me a DM, connect on LinkedIn with me as well, and also follow me on LinkedIn. You can also follow me on Instagram, @CJBinspires, and When We Reach, it has a website, onewereach.org. So anything that you want to know about the organization or how to get involved, you can reach out on the website.
Very good. And I will make sure that all of those are in the show notes for people who want to find you later. Again, I really appreciate you joining me at the table today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for creating a seat.
Yes. And until next time, remember the most important conversations don't always happen in the boardroom. They happen right here at the table. Thank you for listening. And if this podcast episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend. Invite them to the table. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform.